All right, here we go. Welcome to another edition of Talk Stocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds, and today we're lucky enough to be joined by Steve Letwin, chairman of Cassiar Gold. Cassiar trades on the TSX Venture Exchange with the ticker GLDC. Hey, Steve, how you doing today?
I'm good, Kira. How are you?
Excellent. So you survived another Calgary Stampede.
I did, yes. It's always great to have the stampede, but it can be, as you know, a little exhausting. But we're through it. The weather turned out great attendance. It was good for the city.
Yeah, I know you're quite the host. You're really involved in a lot of that stuff. So,
Yeah.
and it's what an amazing thing. It's like 2 weeks. Oh my gosh, I don't know if we'd be able to survive out here in BC if it was like even 2 days. But that's great. So a couple of years ago, we actually touched base with Marco, the president and CEO for Cassiar. We kind of quickly covered it, but watching the progress that you guys have been making steadily over the last couple of years, and thought that, hey, it's time to get you back. And it was nice that you could join us because you've got a really interesting story, really interesting background, and kind of wanted to unpack that. So if you wouldn't mind, would you mind giving us a little bit of background on who you are and your sort of path, what you kind of done before?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, once I finished my education, I started with Procter and Gamble in finance in Toronto, and then got headhunted by a fellow named Jack Gallagher. Would be before your time there. It goes back to the beginning of the 80s, but it was with a company called Dome Petroleum. And I came out to help him because the company was in trouble with the banks. Oil prices had fallen dramatically. So I spent about 7 years at Dome helping restructure it, and we were successful. So as a reward, they gave me a chief financial officer position with one of their spinoff companies, which I really enjoyed. I stayed another 6 years, and then did a move from there to help Mike Phelps out. He was with a company called Union Energy, West Coast Energy out of Vancouver. You probably know it. And he was trying to dispose or monetize West Coast Petroleum. So I did a deal with 5 Hong Kong billionaires at the time, sold the company at a much larger, higher price than what he anticipated. The Hong Kong gentleman quite liked me. So as part of the transaction, I actually went over and I worked for them in Hong Kong for about 3 years. Spent about 100 days a year in Hong Kong. And I learned a tremendous amount. They were real estate people, but they were in everything known to man, including mining. So once I was done there, came back to Canada. I became chief financial officer of TransCanada Pipelines, and then became chief operating officer of Enbridge. Did a restructuring of one of their businesses in the East. And as a reward, they made me an executive vice president, sent me to Harvard, and then on to Texas, where I was sent to fix up an operation which wasn't running too well. So I guess my past has been around getting things fixed. They used to call me the repairman at Enbridge. And then at 55 years of age, my boss at the time was staying on, and I wanted to run something. And I got headhunted by the board of IAMGOLD. And I didn't have any gold experience, but I had a lot of resource experience. And they had some big challenges. So I went off to Toronto in 2010 and was able to turn things around. We purchased Trelawney in 2012, which the market didn't like at all. But that turned out to be Cote. And I was successful in going over to Japan and bringing 450 million US back to Canada to help move that mine ahead. So when I left IAMGOLD about 7 years ago, it was just at the stage of being built. Unfortunately, they ran into the pandemic, so they had some challenges cost-wise, but they recovered. And the stock basically went from a $2 stock to a $32 stock. And the Japanese have done extremely well, and I'm very close to them. Sumitomo Corporation, so they still reach out to me quite regularly. And I also, during that time, the Hong Kong billionaires that I did a lot of work for and made quite a bit of money for them during that 3 years, they were big investors in IAMGOLD, and they held like 70 million shares. So it was a huge investment in Asia, and they ended up doing extremely well. So I never took any bonuses. I took everything in shares. In 2017, I got the award for bang for the buck in Canada. For they compared 100 companies all across business units, and the stock had a 238% return from where it was. And then on top of that was about a seven banger. So really pleased because I kept my shares, stayed as a believer even after I left. And I'm very pleased for Renaud Adams and his team. They've done a great job. When I retired, I was asked to come west and help a private company here called Mancal, which stands for Mannix Calgary. And we were just selected as one of the best managed private companies in Canada. So we got a nice award about a month ago. So things have turned around here, and I've been here almost 7 years now. I live here in Calgary, and Cassiar has been a great experience for me. It's been in my portfolio for about 8 years. As you probably know, I'm the largest independent shareholder, and I've never sold a share of Cassiar and have no intentions of doing so. So similar to Iron Gold, Enbridge, I was very, very big on taking shares versus cash. And in the case of Enbridge, in the case of Iron Gold, and now in the case of Cassiar, that's turned out to be a good strategy.
Well, thanks for giving us a run through. So with returns like that, I'm sure you're welcomed with open arms back to Hong Kong anytime you want. So that's
I am.
That's great. So I'm Gold, you were president and CEO of that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a pretty big role for you. Obviously, a major, much bigger company. Cassiar, I guess, today has around a $60 million Canadian market cap, and it's currently an explorer without sort of any revenue. What sort of got your fancy? How did you sort of know about Cassiar? How did you get involved? What's the story there?
Well, we were actually called Margot Resources way back when, and it was a play in southern BC, and it was more of a gold tungsten play. And back to the Hong Kong-China connection, I was made aware of the Cassiar deposit, which was being funded by a company out of China, some real estate guys, who put a significant amount of money into road development. There's about 160 to 170 kilometers of roads. They built a mill, a tailings pond. They have power access. They're just off of Highway 37 South. So I went up there to look at it because they had fatigue here. They were putting money into it, and since 2008, and I think they were just tired of having to keep writing checks. So I went up there, and it looked almost identical to Cote, which is just off the highway between Sudbury and Timmins. And so when I looked at the deposit, and you literally turn off the highway, you're in the deposit. In fact, Highway 37 South bisects the south and the north. The north is the bulk tonnage area. The south is where they had high grade, narrow vein production for a number of years, about 300,000 or 400,000 ounces of gold. So I honest to God fell in love with it immediately. I said, wow, this is a tremendous opportunity. And for $1 million worth of shares, we acquired Cassiar, Margot shares, and we renamed it Cassiar. I'm not supposed to say how much money was put into Cassiar, but I would say it was in the tens of millions. And I would tell you that to replace or replicate that infrastructure would be huge in terms of dollars. And you know this today, everything is way more expensive. All the roads are built, the core shack's there, the mills there needs to be refurbished, but it's there. The mine permit's in place, the exploration permits are in place, the power access is there, there's water access. The relationship with the First Nations is tremendous. All of that came in the package. So that's how it started. And that was in 2019. So about 7 years ago. I've always had an interest in companies outside of my main job. And when I joined Iron Gold, I made them aware of my sort of entrepreneurial ventures. And certainly when I came here with Fred Mannix, who owns this company, who is a shareholder of Cassiar, I made him very aware that I enjoy diversification, and that's what I do. I sit on a Chevron subsidiary board in the U.S., about a $6 billion U.S. company. I'm on the board of that company, and I enjoy having a little diversification. So Cassiar has been a labor of love, if you will, through tough times and good times. And as you said, we're finally at a point where it's coming together. Marco's done a great job. But here, it's really coming together.
For those of my viewers that aren't super familiar with Cassiar, you've given a little bit of an explanation, but it's the property's up north in BC.
Yes.
And you guys kind of have two. You got, like you indicated, you've got your Cassiar North and your Cassiar South. Maybe you could just give us like a little bit of an elevator pitch again. You came out with a MRE, a mineral resource estimate, I guess, last summer, about a year ago at this point in time, and you put a pretty big number out there. So, would you mind giving us a bit of an overview on the assets?
Yeah, not at all. And by the way, and thank you for that, Kier. That's a good lead in. You want to get to Cassiar, you fly to Whitehorse and the Yukon, and you drive about 5 hours south. And again, it's right off the highway. And it is about 60,000 hectares, about 150,000 acres. And as you come down the highway, literally on the north side, you've got the bulk-tonnage. And that's where we put the resource out here. It was about 1.9 million of inferred resources at about a gram a ton. I'm rounding. And then we have about 400,000 ounces of measured and indicated at around a gram and a half. So it's a really nice deposit, a shallow, about 150 meters. Strip ratio is very low, very friendly area in terms of mining it. It's still an exploration project, but we are moving quickly to try and get it to more of call it a brownfield development project and into production. And I like to talk to Rick Rule a lot. I have a lot of time for him. Eric Sprott, they always talk about, you've got to be able to show people a path to net present value. And so what we've been doing is de-risking the project, doing a lot of drilling. This year we have around 10,000 meters scheduled. Last year we did 7,000. And drilling is, I'm not going to say easy, but it's a very manageable program. We have a great contractor in place to do the drilling. Jill Maxwell, our vice president of exploration, is a gift from God. She is tremendous at running that program, and we've got the same people involved every year, so a lot of consistency. Yeah, so it is. It's got great mineralization. It's got a great future. Our objective, because it's a team, is to get it closer and closer to a period where we can say, hey, we have a mine here. And if somebody's interested in working with us to develop that mine, we would be keen on hearing you. And, again, I have to be careful. I would just tell you that over the last 2 years, there's been significant interest in that kind of approach. So similar to what I did at Iron Gold, when I brought Sumitomo in as a partner, that approach has been taken. And I would tell you that we've had success. So we are moving towards that point where it's a de-risked project. We understand the metallurgy. We understand the cost of what it would take to build 150,000 ounce a year production mine. We've been in constant communication with the First Nations, who are our partners. It's really set up nicely, similar again to Côté, which went from 1.5 million ounces to 22 million ounces. We see at Cassiar the opportunity to move the ounce count up significantly with further exploration. So it's very exciting. I own 7.5 million shares. I've never sold a share. I own 5% of the company. Insiders own and advisors own about 12%. A lot of skin in the game. Our CEO, Marco Roque, pretty well owns almost as much as I do. He's a huge believer in putting your money where your mouth is, and he's done that. So all of our management team is there, committed. People here in Calgary are shareholders. The Mannix family are shareholders. There's a lot of belief in Cassiar, which is good to see.
Excellent. So you talked a bit about Cassiar North, and then there's a Cassiar South. And when I've heard of the company for a couple of years. I met Marco several times. I've always thought there was, again, pardon me for talking, but my opinion is there's always been a little bit of a disconnect on the story, because you've got Cassiar South and you got this permit. You've got a mill. It's a 300 ton per day mill. Seems a little
300 ton.
Is it 300?
Yes.
Well, there you go. It seems a little small for sort of like a more of a bulk tonnage type scenario. So I've always wondered, like, hey, is there an opportunity to get the Cassiar South stuff going that might help with some of the funding for growing your Cassiar North, your bulk tonnage type scenario? Anyways, I don't know. How do you see things?
Be an advisor, because you're right on the money. I've got to be careful just because of confidentiality.
Sure.
I would say you're right on.
Yeah,
And,
I told Marco this a couple of years ago, and like your pitch is like, for a smart resource investor, you got two different stories here, and I think people would like you to utilize that mill and some of the high grade historic production. Again, you don't have MREs and things like that. You'd have to do some work, but it was quite a bit higher grade. You're looking at 10 to 20 times the sort of like grades. You could obviously make a lot more money on the ore if grades like that held up as compared to your bulk tonnage. So anyways, that's just my own personal opinion. But again, I think that there's a great opportunity for maybe to leverage that at some point, so you can really sort of focus on growing the bulk tonnage. We all know that bulk tonnage type scenarios is really where the mining is going these days. People are looking for large, long life mines rather than sort of small old timer type mines. But there are certain groups that really like those smaller mines where they can make robust margin and they want to take those things on. So sounds like you guys have some strategy, or you've got some thinking in place for things like that on how to better leverage the value of Cassiar South.
You couldn't have said it any better. You're well said. Those veins, as you point out, are 15 to 20 grams a ton. There are about 7 attics there. A couple of them are very prolific. It's again, roads right to the attic, and it is a 300 ton, but can be expanded probably to double that. Tailings ponds in place. Again, if you happen to hit a vein like they did in the early days, and you were able to produce 100,000 ounces, that's $400 million. So to your point, why wouldn't you explore that opportunity? And the answer is we are. And so you're right on. That's exactly what we're looking at. We're trying to bring that in, closer to today. We'll see how successful we are in the next this year and next year. But I will tell you that it's a big focus, and we haven't lost focus on the north, where the bulk tonnage is, because again, we're talking about a very shallow deposit, 150 meters. It's literally nothing, and there's virtually no overburden. So this is a great opportunity to not only enhance the bulk tonnage, but also to hopefully get someone to partner with us to say, hey, why don't we try exploring one of those high grade narrow veins and put it through the mill, or even move the concentrate and get some cash for it. That is a clear strategy of ours.
Excellent. And I think you guys put out a news release in January indicating that you're looking at a mill refurbishment and tailings monetization high grade gold strategy. So there you go.
Yes.
One thing I did want to ask, as I was looking through past sort of financings, and there was one that was done here not too long ago. It was just done just here in May, a couple months ago. And it had something about warrants that could be exercised, but only if the company entered into a JV or strategic transaction on the Cassiar South. Is that a bit of a tell? Am I supposed to read a bit into that? Like, that's kind of an interesting aspect of a warrant.
Yeah. So good question. Sharp dude here. Let me just say it probably mirrors what you were saying earlier.
All right. Cool. Well, yeah, I read this stuff, and like I said, I'm a big fan of what you guys have going on.
Yeah.
I think you guys should really focus on trying to monetize that,
Yeah.
and really focus on building the asset that's really going to be the value driver, which is going to be your Cassiar North, building that thing, going from 2 million, who knows, 3, 4, 5 million. Again, Mother Nature will have to cooperate with you, but sounds like you've got a pretty good exploration program. So I was also doing some reading on that, and sounds like this year, 2026, your exploration that you have that you've begun, your drill program is going to kind of be the largest drill program that you've done at Cassiar North in several years, or maybe ever. Are you able to comment on that?
Yeah, it's definitely, we've done some large ones, anywhere from 7,000 to 9,000 ish, because we've had some great success. But this would be more or less a record for us in terms of drilling, and it's focused on the north, as you say. So we just saw such positive results from last year. So some of this is step out drilling to literally try and make sure that we can better define the deposit and better define the metallurgy. So we're basically doing two things so that we can get a better feel for what a PEA would look like. I'm not rushing a PEA. I want it done properly. And, the good news is as we explore and we find more resource, we also want to test the metallurgy, which has gone well, and make sure that we can properly communicate with our shareholders what type of resource we have and what kind of capital it would take to process it. So everything right now looks really positive, but we need to do the work, and we're not going to rush it. We're going to make sure that we put information out to our shareholders that is reliable and has high integrity.
And is some of the drilling going to be infill so you can move more of your resource into a measured and indicated category rather than inferred?
Correct.
Do you have an idea of what the split would be between sort
I
of like,
don't right now, and
okay,
Jill Maxwell would kill me if I started to talk about that.
that's all right. That's fine. I just thought I'd ask. But
Yeah.
the Taurus deposit, as it's called, currently hosts, if you're able to add the categories, 2.3 million ounces, like you indicated earlier in our chat. Just over 400,000 of those are in the indicated category. The other 1.9 million ounces are in the inferred. Are there any other targets outside of Taurus that are sort of close nearby that are going to see any drilling this year?
Yeah, and again, I think I would be probably stepping out of my range if I said too much, but the answer is yes. And there are some targets that would extend the resource that we will be pursuing. Jill is sort of our quarterback on that, our Tom Brady, if you will, and she's excellent, extremely competent technically, and she is guiding us to where we want to go. So I would say yes, our expectation is we're going to see an extension. I don't know the quantification of that, but similar to what you said, I have a lot of optimism about the deposit growing in size.
And I guess the last time a MRE was done was back in 2022, and it was an all inferred resource. It was 1.4 million ounces. So the one that you did last year obviously grew it, went from 1.4 to 2.3, and then moved more of that into the indicated category, which is obviously higher confidence. Is that you mentioned not looking to rush a PEA? From my experience, PEAs work best when you have a little bit more on that measured and indicated category. So is that something
Yes.
you're maybe looking to upgrade the MRE again before you get out and do a PEA?
Well, PEA can basically be done in stages, and PEA itself, and I've done enough of them. Certainly
Yeah.
Iron Gold, probably 6 of them. What I like about Jill's approach and our advisors is that it's incremental. So we're spending some money to get information, get data. And as we get that data, we then look at our strategy and what we need to do. So it's a combination of what you mentioned, moving more towards measured and indicated. It's an indication of better understanding the metallurgy. And when you put those two together, to your point, you come up with a PEA that is reliable. For example, you might have a part of the deposit, maybe 1 million ounces, that can be easily mined and processed. And so the cadence of your mining and your mine plan will be driven by the information that you gather through your drilling and through your metallurgy work. So you can come up with a sequencing that really enhances returns to shareholders, minimizes capital expenditures, and delivers cash flow. The quickest cash flow for us, and you hit on this already, Kier, would be if we were able to find a vein up on Cassiar South that was prolific, and we were able to move that high grade ore into a refurbished mill. That's a quick cash flow return. The bulk tonnage, which is, what most of us are used to in Canada or even Africa and South America, takes a lot more diligence and a lot more data. So the beauty of Cassiar is that you've got optionality. You can, as you said, you can pursue the south, which looks like it could be very attractive if you were able to identify a vein, move that ore down the hill, which isn't much of a hill, to the refurbished mill and immediately start generating cash flow. And then on the other side, as you expand the resource and get more data on the metallurgy, you develop a mine plan that reflects the type of gold basically that you have in the resource and what's the best approach on that mine plan when you look at the deposit as to what area do you hit first to minimize cost and capital and improve returns for the shareholder. That's again what we did at Côté, which turned out to be a great return for IAMGOLD shareholders.
Why don't we turn our attention to a couple other areas? Cap table. How many shares are outstanding?
160 million. I'm rounding. It's 159.5 million.
Okay. And on a fully diluted basis, do you have any sort of like significant warrants outstanding?
Well, that would be what I would call a fully diluted, because we don't really have anything in the near future that's going to materially change that. So I would call it 160 million shares.
Okay. And how much cash do you guys have that, what's the last sort of publicly disclosed figure that you're comfortable?
7 million.
Sorry?
7 million.
7 million? Okay. And is that going to fully fund the work that you have for 2026?
Yes.
All right. And I was noticing, a pet peeve of mine, and again, every situation is different, but I thought I'd ask you about it. RSUs, DSUs, I did notice that there's some compensation related to that for the team. What's the line of thinking around that?
Well, the RSUs, which you're fully taxed on, as you know, the minute you CRAs change that, we don't give out a lot of those, but it's more of a retention. It's very competitive out there right now here. And so for our technical team, we tend to use that as retention. For me, it's a very small, immaterial amount. But for people like Jill and the team, we use the RSUs. We obviously give options as well in the hope that they'll come in the money. But that's really the strategy. In the oil and gas business here, they're used extensively, as you probably know, and aggressively. So I'm not a huge fan of RSUs, but I also recognize that to be competitive and retain good people, you've got to use whatever you can in your toolkit.
Sure.
RSUs and options are ways to.
Sure. Does that also help control the salaries as well? If there's
Yes.
an equity component, does that keep the
Yes.
salaries for some of the executives a bit lower?
Exactly.
And
By the way, I don't get paid anything. I get RSUs and options, but I don't take any cash. Never have, never will.
I did notice that there seemed to be quite a number of options. Again, I might be wrong, but it looked like there was about 6 million options that were in the money. Again, those are mostly to directors, officers, and maybe some consultants. Any chance of seeing some of those exercised?
I can't speak for anybody else, but if I was to exercise options, they would be retained as shares. So
Okay.
I've never cashed a Cassiar share option RSU. I've
Right.
kept them all.
Excellent. And in terms of what are some catalysts that we should be searching for from this kind of the largest exploration program that you've done in I think Cassiar Gold's history this year? What are what are a couple of key catalysts that that we should be watching for over the next couple of months?
Well, I think, with the run up in gold last year, I think you saw a lot of people do their financing pretty well completed by Christmas 2025. So a lot of them built up their treasuries with raises. And as a result, and the assays, everybody's busy here. The drilling companies, the labs. And so everybody took that money and they're putting it into the ground and they're trying to expand their resources, just like we are. So we have an expectation that we're going to be able to further improve our resource. And I would just say that our expectation would be 90% of our drill holes, we found gold. We're going to continue to see some really good results, would be my hope. And we're also going to be able to give our shareholders more information about how we're moving towards a point where we can produce cash flow. And to your point earlier in the conversation, fund our program without having to issue shares. So we want to be self-sustaining and be able to get to that net present value and show a very clear path to it. And again, I always reinforce this. We don't have to spend money on infrastructure. All the infrastructure was there. So every penny that we raise, literally on a technical basis, is for enhancing the resource, better understanding the deposit, and being able to help our shareholders see more clearly what it would take to get the gold out of the ground. And it's a great opportunity. As you mentioned, sort of a $60 million market cap, 2.5 million ounces of gold, inferred and indicated. That's pretty cheap gold in the ground. That's 150 meters deep. It's continuous. All the roads are there, power there, etc. When you're looking even with gold at $4,000, you're looking at a pretty cheap gold in the ground valuation. So I feel very confident we're going to be able to see that share price move up once people start to recognize that.
Do you think the exploration is going fast enough? Like, are you guys doing enough meterage? Obviously, you have a little bit of a shorter work program just with seasonality and where it's located. Do you like? I guess it's a function of how much capital is sort of available and stuff like that. But for you, sitting in your seat, being chairman, and your track record and some of the business you've been involved with, are you happy with the progress, or do you wish it would go faster? Or any comment on that?
I'm going to say it again about Jill Maxwell. She's probably one of the best I've seen. Our drilling progress is world class. We are drilling quickly. We're getting results to the lab quickly. She is simply outstanding. I couldn't be happier with her performance and that team's performance. And knock on wood here, not one safety incident in the 5 years we've been drilling there, not one. And don't want to jinx things, but she's extremely capable and confident. So to answer your question, I'm extremely pleased with it. I think we're going to see good progress. And again, we've had a continuous use of a contractor who is, one of the best I've run into.
And your company chair, how involved are you? You roll up your sleeves on this one, and you're quite involved. Obviously, you're starting to do a bit more sort of like speaking on behalf of the company, doing a few podcasts and and things like this, trying to get the word out. How do you and Marco share some responsibilities, and what role do you sort of see as yourself sort of filling?
Marco is one of the hardest working CEOs that I've come across. He literally lives and breathes the job. He, as I say, he owns almost as many shares as I do. So he's fully immersed in the company. We both own about 5%. So he's incentivized to move this forward. So in terms of our relationship, we have a team meeting every Wednesday morning for about an hour and a half. We have advisors like David Reese, James Maxwell, Chris Stewart. We have Steve Robertson. We have a huge amount of intelligence as advisors and on the board. And they also participate in that weekly meeting. They also have their separate technical meetings, which happen on a regular basis. So we have the benefit of huge technical experience. David Reese is like a god in this area. Janet Gold, oh my God, he's a gift. We're very lucky to have him. James Maxwell, extremely competent, capable. Steve Robertson, we've just, and Chris, I mean, they're just great people. And Marco's the kind of guy that if he needs to talk to me, he's on the phone, and there was an old commercial that when E.F. Hutton phones, you answer the phone. When Marco phones me, I answer the phone. Like we're not out of step. And he's at site right now. He goes to site 2 or 3 times a year. I was at site last year. I'm going again in August. I'm just a big fan of that. At Iron Gold, I went to Africa 57 times. I went to South America 51 times. I was at the site all the time. And I raised on a farm. My father always said, you want to understand what's going on? Walk the property. And we get up to Cassiar, we walk the property, literally. And we make sure everything looks safe. We make sure environmentally everything's good. And you can't understand it on Zoom calls. I didn't bring $450 million back from Tokyo on a Zoom call. I went to Tokyo 13 times. You need to build trust. I meet with the First Nations. I meet with all our technical people, and I never, ever get in front of Marco. He has a job to do. He's empowered. I'm a big believer in that, of empowerment. And if he needs to get off the field and come to the sidelines and talk, I'm there for him. And we talk a lot.
Well, Steve, I think that's a pretty good wrap there. Thank you so much for your time, and give us a good run through on Cassiar, your involvement, what's going on for your 2026 exploration season. I wish you lots of luck, and it was a real treat to have you on and hear your sort of involvement. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and enjoy your summer in Kelowna here. I hope. I had to ask you: is everything okay out there in terms of the wildfires and things like that? Are you guys safe?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
we're okay so far, but we're having a real hot spell, so we'll see what happens. But Steve, you stay safe as well.
I think everybody is.
Yeah, you stay safe as well, and
thank you, sir, and thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.